Yeah, Chris, thanks for the welcome, and also thanks to Willamette and Noraxon to give me the possibility to present some of our results in Osnabrück. Bringing the best of clinical research into clinical practice, a physiotherapeutic perspective. I got the idea on the flight to Chicago. I like the story, and when I start to prepare my presentation, I just ask myself, is it really just a physiotherapeutic perspective, or is it perspective for every clinical acting person that are treating patients? And I think we are not only physiotherapists here. Most of us are experts in the management of injured people. The reasons are all of us probably has competence in clinical reasoning. We know how to analyze a patient, to analyze an athlete, whatever. We have competence in diagnosis, not only medical diagnosis, we have much more diagnosis, physiotherapeutic diagnosis, sports science diagnosis, and other kinds of diagnoses. And we have knowledge. We have practical knowledge. Each of us has experience to work with patients. Each of us has a theoretical knowledge. We know a lot of evidence base. We know how to get to literature, how to bring both together, and we have experiential knowledge over the time. So we are experts, all of us. So not just the physios. But sometimes we have open questions. How effective is an intervention? How targeted is an intervention? It's a nice story. How to activate the vastus medialis is a never-ending story. How to quantify results, also a very interesting thing. How to quantify the results to a patient. So it's next point also, how to improve communication. Communication is for me a very important thing to bring the results, not only the biomechanical results, the results itself to the patients. And personally I think, hopefully the most of you also, that clinical research can help answering these questions. Hopefully after my talk we have some more ideas about that. Before I start with some results, just a quick look at my university in the beautiful town Osnabrück in the north, where we have a lot of cows and all the stuff. In general, we have two universities in Osnabrück: the not the University of Osnabrück, and the Osnabrück University of Applied Science. So I'm at the Osnabrück University of Applied Science. We have in total around 14,000 students. This was last year. We have a lot of partner universities all over the world. With our PT department, we have cooperations with Zurich, with Ireland, with Australia, with San Sebastian in Spain. We build up cooperations with Cuba. It's nice. Next month I'm in Cuba for 10 days. It's perfect cooperation. We build up cooperation with Thailand. In July I was in Thailand. They're very interesting, and they have also a biomechanical lab, so it might be very interesting. So a lot of things happen. We have 110 bachelor and master and PhD programs, and Lower Saxony's. We are Lower Saxony's leader in research among University of Applied Science. We got a lot of third-party funded money. That's in general. Physio-specific, just one key point I want to mention is we get about around 100 new PT students each year, and each of them has to visit me in in our lab, and get some lectures. At least once during the study times. They can come more than one time, but they have to put on hands on the biomechanics. That's fantastic. And a lot of students, or some of them students, complete their final thesis in this lab. We have 4 bachelor programs just for physios. We have 4 master programs that are related to physio. And also we have a PhD program for physios in cooperation with the University of Osnabrück. We have a lot of research activities. As Christian mentioned, Musicians Health is one of our center research activities, third party founded, and some other things also. And we try to put everything together in our motion labs. We combine biomechanical analysis, applied biomechanical analysis, and physical therapy. So we implement the sensor-based technology into the clinical reasoning process. So the transfer of clinical research into clinical practice is one of our most important part of our philosophy. We try to bring the technology to the PT, not the PTs to the technology. So the physiotherapist should try to work with biomechanics without forgetting his possibilities as a physiotherapist working in clinical reasoning. Okay, just some words. Let's come to the interesting thing. All of the studies all of the results of the studies I present are bachelor theses. So it's really the students work on them for half a year in the lab, and these are the results. Some of them are published, some of them we are in preparation for publication. So you see. First of all, this study is done or finished at the beginning of this year. Two students, they start development of a soccer-specific muscle fatigue program, and additionally they investigated the effect of muscle fatigue on activation patterns of the biceps, femoris and semitendinosus muscle. They got 19 soccer players, healthy soccer players, aged between 19 and 35. They run a standardized test protocol. There's a pre-test, Nordic hamstring curls, and a 10-meter sprint. 10-meter sprint, 30 minutes, then 30 minutes of a soccer fatigue load protocol, and then the post-test with the Nordic hamstrings, curls, and the 10-meter sprint again. Primary outcome was the muscle activity of the hamstrings and the rating of the perceived exertion with the Borg scale. Probably most of you know them. It's from 6 to 20. 20 is the total exertion, 6 is no exertion after the fatigue protocol. And we got a within group comparison and also a correlation between the RPE value and the muscle activity. The protocol, the students looked in the literature. They got a lot of research. Took a long time, and they designed the protocol on a 60 and 40 meter small field. Played 5 against 5 without the goalkeeper over 30 minutes, because the literature says after 30 minutes in the first or second half the injury risk increases. So the protocol runs for 30 minutes. We got a high soccer specific load. They are very run a lot with a whist ball. It's interesting. Normal fatigue protocols only fatigue a specific muscle group, or they have a running protocol, but they designed a protocol running, jumping, whist ball, with everything that's really quite close to the normal activity of a soccer player. We tracked the 10-meter sprint and the Nordic hamstrings. We calculate the mean value of step 3 to 10, and also the peak activity of the Nordic hamstring curls. You can see the one report of the player, and the results were, this is interesting, we see differences. We calculate the mean value between pre and post test, and for the Nordic hamstring curls we see there's no significant difference between pre and post test. So the Nordic hamstring curl seems not to be that interesting for us. On the other side, the 10-meter sprint, we've seen significant changes in muscle activity for the biceps on both sides, as well as for the semitendinosus muscle. And if we calculate the correlations between the RPE value and the muscle activity, we see that we see no significant correlation between the pre-test RPE values and the muscle activity, but with the post-test we see differences. Here's the post-test, the RPE value in average was 15.82, and if we calculate the correlations between RPE and post-activity, we see only for the biceps muscle significant differences. Not for the hamstrings, and also not for the semitendinosus muscle. So this is very interesting, keep that in mind. So the 10-meter sprint is suitable to show muscle fatigue of the hamstrings, but the Nordic hamstring curls are not. And we see a correlation between the RPE value and the decrease of biceps activity. And this is interesting, the correlation of the RPE value and the biceps reduction might be related to the high injury rate of the biceps muscle, because Ekstrand in 2011 got a study, and one of her results was that 83% of the injuries occurs to the biceps femoris muscle. So maybe it's just a hypothesis or just an idea. Maybe this might be interesting that the RPE value correlates with this. So maybe it's interesting to think about the idea that if a soccer player said at the end of a half, hey coach, I feel very tired, my RPE value, if you know that, is around 18 or 19. So we can, based on this data, we can think, okay, his muscle activity of the bicep is very low, and maybe he's got a higher injury risk. Just ideas, maybe. Publication is in preparation. Maybe, hopefully, at the end of this year or beginning of next year, we will publish it in a German paper. So, based on these results, the RPE scale can be used to assess the reduction in activity of the biceps femoris muscle in soccer, and sprints reflects muscle fatigue better than a maximum strength test in soccer. That's just based on the results. Next study, or some ongoing or planned studies, as Patrick mentioned in this talk, the occurrence of musculoskeletal injuries and corresponding risk factors among elite youth health players. Health players? Soccer players. We got the cooperation with Mainz 05 and also with Osnabrück, sure, VfL Osnabrück. We designed the study. First of all, probably you know this guy, Patrick, and he is one of our ongoing PhD students. He didn't mention it, but he starts his PhD in cooperation with us to increase the quality of soccer treatments. Patrick. Okay. In Mainz, we collected 110 data sets. In Osnabrück, just 60. So we have 170 in total, elite youth soccer players. We got this test battery. Sadly, this test battery differs between both clubs. It's not that easy to bring both together. Probably will take time, but we're collecting data. The medical screening, the PET screening, the history, injury history, with a lot of functional testing, and additionally, as Patrick presented in his talks, the biomechanical analysis, EMG based. Test protocol was the test battery. Then we're tracking the occurrence of hamstring injuries over the course of the 2022 and 2023 season. Study designs is not fixed. We plan a lot of designs. We plan a cross-sectional design, maybe compare different youth players with each other. We try to plan a prospect cohort to identify risk factors, and maybe an RCT to look on the effect of biofeedback training with some of the soccer players. What are our next steps? Continue data collection over multiple seasons. We try to increase the sample size, hopefully over 500 maybe, whatever it is, or how long it takes. We would like to expand an expansion of the database by acquiring additional clubs. So if we have professional clubs here, please feel free, get in contact. It will be very interesting to get more first division clubs where we can collect data. We try to implement a muscle fatigue protocol at the beginning of the season. We have in Mainz, as an example, as one EMG station. In Osnabrück we have around 4 or 5, I'm not sure. So we can bring all the stuff to Mainz. We can track during a game. If we track after each halftime, we can track 10 players for each day. It might be very interesting. We are thinking about implementation of artificial intelligence, AI, künstliche Intelligenz, because we will collecting so many parameters. It will be a couple of 100 parameters with all these things. I think it goes in the direction of big data. And if we try to analyze the risk factors and how risk factors interfere to each other, and with the idea of, designing a very good test battery cluster that's very, very validated and have a high predictor quality, maybe we need the AE to have a blick inside. Right now I'm preparing a submission to get some money from our university, just to get some support from students or something like that. So results to come. Okay, the funny question now. Next study is the influence of different exercises of the muscle activation of the vastus medialis muscle. Yes, things the world want to know. Sample size, 49 participants. We got also EMG protocol. We have 12 different exercises that seems to claim to be suitable for vastus medialis muscle activation. Some of the exercises are from a literal research, some of them from the students itself. They are all experienced physiotherapists, so they also have the possibility to say, hey, I think this is a good exercise, and so on. And so we got this 12 exercises. We track the vastus medialis and lateralis, and we run a comparison between the ratio, the comparison between both muscles based on the ratio of the peak muscle activation, with the idea, as a clinician, if I want to have exercise to have a maximum activation of the VMO, and the other ratio, the mean muscle activation, for a clinician to have activation during the whole exercise is higher than the lateral part of the vastus. So these are the 12 exercises. You can see it's on this side, hip flexion with a rubber band. This is from Simon Roth, this exercise. We got this active straight raise. We got open kinetic chain exercise. We got closed kinetic chain exercise. So a lot of kind of flowers. Results, you have a comparison between the ratios. If you look for the peak activity, I didn't mark the stars for the significance. We see there's no single exercise is superior to all other exercises. We saw some significant difference between exercises, but there was not the perfect exercise to say this is good. For the peak activity. On the other side, we have, if you look for the ratio of the mean activity, there's something interesting happened. Except of the 3 lunges exercises, we see the same thing. There might be some difference between significant difference between the exercises, but not one of these 9 exercises did not have this superior effect against the others. But these 3 exercises, the 3 lunges exercises, have significant higher ratio than the other 9 exercises, and they have no difference between them. So it seems to be, as a result, lunges are suitable to increase the mean activity ratio between VMO and VL in healthy populations. But there's no superior exercise to increase the peak activity ratio between VMO and VL in healthy populations. In general, the advantage is, done 2 slides back, we see in total that the ratio is always higher than 1. So in all exercises, the mean activity, the vastus medialis, has a higher activation in the lateralis. It's a good story for all exercises, but we do not have this is superior exercises in peak activity, only mean activity. Next step, we have the next students starting next month for a confirmation of the results with a repetition of the study, and then we try to plan a subsequent publication. Okay, now the nicest one, the never-ending stories. Which EMG normalization method fits best? Ah, I like this. We got a sample size, students got 10 participants. They have 2 legs. So, and we measured over 3 measurement days. We have 2 legs, 3 days. In total, we got 60 data sets to analyze. We got an EMG and the IMU. The IMU is a trigger signal for the squats. And we have different kind of squats. We difference between the joint angle, 30 degree and 60 degree. And also we look for the cadence, thanks Zach for that, yesterday evening. It's with 15, 30 and 45 beats per minute. Main outcome is, or primary outcome is a VMO and the VL, and we have a comparison of the percent standard deviation over time of the squat. It looks like this. As an example, it's the vastus laterals with 60 degree and 15 beats per minute. This method is a MVC normalization method with a static test and then compare it with the test itself. We have this internal normalization. We calculate the mean value of a squat and then compare each time frame with this mean value. And the same with the average, with the internal peak normalization. We have this peak value and normalize the data to this peak value. This is the mean values. These are the results over time. This is the percent standard deviation of each method. The black one is MVC, the green one, the red one is the internal mean, and the green one is the internal peak normalization. You see some slight difference. It's very fascinating, and I'm happy about that, because if you calculate based on this the mean percent standard deviation, we see the MVC as a mean deviation of 35 and the internal peak around 40. If we calculate then statistically the difference with the p-value, we see significant differences between the MVC and the internal peak and the internal mean, highly significant. But we do not see difference between the mean and the peak normalization method. Then we calculate, with this idea we calculate for each different type of squat. And if we summarize it up, we see in total for the medialis and lateralis muscle around 51 MVC. The internal peak it's 40, around 40, 39, and 42 and 38 for the internal peak. And then if we take a look at the on the p-values, I marked it red are highly significant differences. Yellow are strongly significant, and green are normal significant. And except of the 60 degree with 45 beats per minute, there's one value that's not statistically different. All the other comparison of the MVC shows differences, mostly strong differences to the other methods. And the other methods, only two values show a significant difference between mean and peak. The rest are without significant differences. So the MVC normalization method show almost highly significant differences to the other methods. And the mean and peak normalization show no significant differences to each other. So based on these results, it's not recommended to use the MVC. It is recommended to use the internal mean and internal peak. That make clinical work much easier for a physio, I think. We don't need this additional measurement. But we can discuss about that. Next step, in the past 3 years we run a lot of measurements to analyze squats. We try to get normative data, but it's not possible because of the variability. It's not useful. But we got this data, and we got for each squat we got the MVC values. So it's around a participant number of 200. We have 2 legs. We have around 400 data sets. We will reanalyze this to the end of the year. Students work. And then we bring all together to strengthen our results, and then we will run a subsequent publication next year to bring it to the scientific community for discussion. And another never-ending story, how reliable are EMG measurements? Also the same nice story. It's the same study design, it's the same students, they run this additionally, because they have time and they want to. 10 participants, 2 data sets for each 2 legs, so we have 20 data sets per day. They measured, each measured 3 times on different days with 1 day break between the measurements. The rest is the same. We have this EMG and IMU as the trigger, different squats, knee joint angle and cadence. Cadence. We run the intra-class correlation based on the 3 measurement days and a comparison then between the normalization methods. We test just the inter-rater reliability, and we plot it over time, the ICC over time. So the curves are similar to each other, but the results are slightly different. We see for the MVC normalization is 0.61, for the internal mean it's 0.68, and for the internal peak it's 0.37. So if you put everything together for all kinds of squats, you see on the right side the ICC classification based on Cicchetti, probably an Italian guy from 94. Looks nice. If I put on some colors, so the red one are the poor ICC, the green one are the excellent ICC, and orange and yellow are in between. We see, just look at the table, that probably the internal peak has the most red fields, so maybe it seems not that good. And if we calculate the average of all ICCs, we see that the MVC with 0.42 and the internal peak with 0.43 are very close to each other with a fair ICC, and the internal peak has just a poor ICC. So based on this result, it is not recommended to use the MVC to normalize EMG data for measurement repetitions in squat, but it's recommended to use the internal mean to normalize the EMG data. And if you put both studies together, both studies says don't use the MVC, and based with this results of the reliability study, it's more favor to the internal mean, it's possible, but also the peak is also nice. So it's the clinical decision which one fits better for the clinician. Oh, close to the end. Take home message. Sensor-based biomechanical clinical research support clinical practice. Hopefully this becomes clear. And sensor-based biomechanics shows new perspective to clinical therapy and also to all other disciplines. I think that's the most important things. We have new perspective, not only the clinicians, not only the physical therapists, also the other persons. Okay, but the last slide is for me one of the most important messages. Have a look on it. Breaking. AI-powered object detection found the largest core on Earth. The core has a height of 1.7 meters, a length of 5.2 meters. And the sentence is important. Don't underestimate the importance of contextual understanding. Without it, data is just random information. So we need the patient, we need our clinical reasoning, our brain, and bring the data into the clinical reasoning process. Okay? Thank you.